Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Jack Frost nipping at your nose. It's the winter season, isn't it? The Christmas season. The Yuletide carols being sung by the choirs. Folks dressed up like Eskimos. Not so much here in Texas, but I mean, it's all relative. If you go to Phoenix in the winter, it can be 70 degrees and they're all wearing parkas because in the summer it's 115. So it's all relative. And hopefully you get along with all your relatives. Grandpa's a dork. But a lovable one. Oh, let's turn some light on. Oh, that's bright. So, anyway, we got our tree. Haven't decorated it yet. We got the bough over the mantle and the fire in the fireplace, and it's a beautiful time of year. But we have a story to read. And we need to get going. All right. Oh. Well, where'd we end up? Oh, the prisoners of the Queen. Clunk. There goes the desk again. The prisoners of the Queen. Excuse me. Approaching the gateway of the Emerald City, the travelers found it guarded by 2 girls of the army of revolt, who opposed their entrance by drawing their knitting needles from their hair and threatening to prod the first that came near. But the Tin Woodman was not afraid. "At the worst, they can but scratch my beautiful nickel plate," he said. "But there will be no worst, for I think I can manage to frighten these absurd soldiers very easily. Follow me closely, all of you." Then, swinging his axe in a great circle to right and left before him, he advanced upon the gate, and the others followed him without hesitation. The girls, who had expected no resistance whatever, were terrified by the sweep of the glittering axe and fled screaming into the city. So our travelers passed the gates in safety and marched down the green marble pavement of the wide street toward the royal palace. "At this rate, we will soon have your majesty upon the throne again," said the Tin Woodman, laughing at his easy conquest of the guards. "Thank you, friend Nick," returned the Scarecrow gratefully. "Nothing can resist your kind heart and your sharp axe." As they passed the rows of houses, they saw through the open doors that men were sweeping and dusting and washing dishes, while the women sat around in groups, gossiping and laughing. "What has happened?" the Scarecrow asked a sad-looking man with a bushy beard, who wore an apron and was wheeling a baby carriage along the sidewalk. "Why, we've had a revolution, your majesty, as you ought to know very well," replied the man. "And since you went away, the women have been running things to suit themselves. I'm glad you have decided to come back and restore order, for doing housework and minding the children is wearing out the strength of every man in the Emerald City." Said the Scarecrow thoughtfully. "If it is such hard work as you say, how did the women manage it so easily?" "I really don't know," replied the man with a deep sigh. "Perhaps the women are made of cast iron." No movement was made as they passed along the street to oppose their progress. Several of the women stopped their gossip long enough to cast curious looks upon our friends, but immediately they would turn away with a laugh or a sneer and resume their chatter. And when they met with several girls belonging to the army of revolt, those soldiers, instead of being alarmed or appearing surprised, merely stepped out of the way and allowed them to advance without protest. This action rendered the Scarecrow uneasy. I'm afraid we are walking into a trap, said he. Nonsense, returned Nick Chopper confidently. The silly creatures are conquered already. But the Scarecrow shook his head in a way that expressed doubt, and Tip said, "It's too easy altogether. Look out for trouble ahead." "I will," returned His Majesty. Unopposed, they reached the royal palace and marched up the marble steps, which had once been thickly encrusted with emeralds, but were now filled with tiny holes where the jewels had been ruthlessly torn from their settings by the army of revolt. And so far, not a rebel barred their way. Through the arched hallways and into the magnificent throne room marched the Tin Woodman and his followers, and here, when the green silken curtains fell behind them, they saw a curious sight. Seated within the glittering throne was General Jinjur, with the Scarecrow's second-best crown upon her head and the royal scepter in her right hand. A box of caramels from which she was eating rested in her lap, and the girl seemed entirely at ease in her royal surroundings. The Scarecrow stepped forward and confronted her, while the Tin Woodman leaned upon his axe and the others formed a half-circle back of His Majesty's person. "How dare you sit in my throne?" demanded the Scarecrow, sternly eyeing the intruder. "Don't you know you're guilty of treason, and that there is a law against treason?" "The throne belongs to whoever is able to take it," answered Ginger, as she slowly ate another caramel. "I have taken it, as you see, so just now I am the queen, and all who oppose me are guilty of treason and must be punished by the law you have just mentioned." This view of the case puzzled the Scarecrow. "How is it, friend Nick?" he asked, turning to the Tin Woodman. "Why, when it comes to law, I have nothing to say," answered the personage, "for laws were never meant to be understood, and it is foolish to make the attempt." "Then what shall we do?" asked the Scarecrow in dismay. "Why don't you marry the queen, and then you can both rule," suggested the Wogglebug. Ginger glared at the insect fiercely. "Why don't you send her back to her mother, where she belongs?" asked Jack Pumpkinhead. Ginger frowned. "Why don't you shut her in a closet until she behaves herself and promises to be good?" inquired Tip. Ginger's lip curled scornfully. "Or give her a good shaking," added the Sawhorse. "No," said the Tin Woodman. "We must treat the poor girl with gentleness. Let us give her all the jewels she can carry and send her away happy and contented." At this, Queen Ginger laughed out loud, and the next minute clapped her pretty hands together thrice, as if for a signal. "You are very absurd creatures," she said, "but I am tired of your nonsense and have no time to bother with you longer." While the monarch and his friends listened in amazement to this impudent speech, a startling thing happened. The Tin Woodman's axe was snatched from his grasp by some person behind him, and he found himself disarmed and helpless. At the same instant, a shout of laughter rang in the ears of the devoted band, and turning to see whence this came, they found themselves surrounded by the army of revolt, the girls bearing in either hand their glistening knitting needles. The entire throne room seemed to be filled with rebels, and the Scarecrow and his comrades realized that they were prisoners. "You see how foolish it is to oppose a woman's wit," said Ginger gaily. "And this event only proves that I am more fit to rule the Emerald City than a Scarecrow. I bear you no ill will, I assure you. But lest you should prove troublesome to me in the future, I shall order you all to be destroyed. That is, all except the boy, who belongs to old Mombi and must be restored to her keeping." The rest of you are not human, and therefore it will not be wicked to demolish you. The sawhorse and the pumpkin's body will have chopped up for kindling wood, and the pumpkin shall be made into tarts. The Scarecrow will do nicely to start a bonfire, and the Tin Woodman can be cut into small pieces and fed to the goats. As for this immense Wogglebug—" "Highly magnified, if you please," interrupted the insect. "I think I will ask the cook to make green turtle soup of you," continued the Queen reflectively. The Wogglebug shuddered. "Or, if that won't do, we might use you for a Hungarian goulash, stewed and highly spiced," she added cruelly. This program of extermination was so terrible that the prisoners looked upon one another in a panic of fear. The Scarecrow alone did not give way to despair. He stood quietly before the Queen, and his brow was wrinkled in deep thought as he strove to find some means of escape. While thus engaged, he felt the straw within his breast move gently. At once his expression changed from sadness to joy, and raising his hand, he quickly unbuttoned the front of his jacket. This action did not pass unnoticed by the crowd of girls clustering about him. But none of them suspected what he was doing until a tiny gray mouse leaped from his bosom to the floor and scampered away between the feet of the army of revolt. Another mouse quickly followed, then another, and another, in rapid succession. And suddenly, such a scream of terror went up from the army that it might easily have filled the stoutest heart with consternation. The flight that ensued turned into a stampede, and the stampede to a panic. For while the startled mice rushed wildly about the room, the Scarecrow had only time to note a whirl of skirts and a twinkling of feet as the girls disappeared from the palace, pushing and crowding one another into their mad efforts to escape. The Queen, at the first alarm, stood up on the cushions of the throne and began to dance frantically upon her tiptoes. Then a mouse ran up the cushions, and with a terrified leap, poor Ginger shot clear over the head of the Scarecrow and escaped through an archway, never pausing in her wild career until she had reached the city gates. So, in less time than I can explain, the throne room was deserted by all save the Scarecrow and his friends, and the Wogglebug heaved a deep sigh of relief as he exclaimed, "Thank goodness, we are saved." "For a time, yes," answered the Tin Woodman, "but the enemy will soon return, I fear." "Let us bar all the entrances to the palace," said the Scarecrow. "Then we shall have time to think what is best to be done." So all except Jack Pumpkinhead, who was still tied fast to the sawhorse, ran to the various entrances of the royal palace and closed the heavy doors, bolting and locking them securely. Then, knowing that the army of revolt could not batter down the barriers in several days, the adventurers gathered once more in the throne room for a council of war. What happened to her? Didn't talk about her. The Scarecrow takes time to think. "It seems to me," began the Scarecrow, when all were again assembled in the throne room, "that the girl Ginger is quite right in claiming to be queen. And if she is right, then I am wrong, and we have no business to be occupying her palace." But you were king until she came," said the Wogglebug, strutting up and down with his hands in his pockets. "So it appears to me that she is the interloper instead of you. Especially as we have just conquered her and put her to flight," added the Pumpkinhead, as he raised his hands to turn his face toward the Scarecrow. "Have we really conquered her?" asked the Scarecrow quietly. "Look out of the window and tell me what you see." Tip ran to the window and looked out. "The palace is surrounded by a double row of girl soldiers," he announced. I thought so, returned the Scarecrow. We are as truly their prisoners as we were before the mice frightened them from the palace. My friend is right, said Nick Chopper, who had been polishing his breast with a bit of chamois leather. Ginger is still the queen, and we are her prisoners. But I hope she cannot get at us, exclaimed the Pumpkinhead with a shiver of fear. She threatened to make tarts of me, you know. Don't worry, said the Tin Woodman. It cannot matter greatly. If you stay shut up here, you will spoil in time anyway. A good tart is far more admirable than a decayed intellect. Very true, agreed the Scarecrow. Oh dear, moaned Jack. What an unhappy lot is mine. Why, dear father, did you not make me out of tin, or even out of straw, so that I would keep indefinitely? Shucks, returned Tip indignantly. You ought to be glad that I made you at all. Then he added reflectively, everything has to come to an end sometime. But I beg to remind you, broke the Wogglebug, who had a distressed look in his bulging round eyes, that this terrible Queen Ginger suggested making a goulash of me. Me! The only highly magnified and thoroughly educated Wogglebug in the wide, wide world. I think it was a brilliant idea, remarked the Scarecrow approvingly. Don't you imagine he would make a better soup? Asked the Tin Woodman, turning toward his friend. Well, perhaps, acknowledged the Scarecrow. The Wogglebug groaned. I can see, in my mind's eye, said he, mournfully, the goats eating small pieces of my dear comrade the Tin Woodman, while my soup is being cooked on a bonfire built by the Sawhorse in Jack Pumpkinhead's body, and Queen Ginger watches me boil while she feeds the flames with my friend the Scarecrow. This morbid picture cast a gloom over the entire party, making them restless and anxious. It cannot happen for some time, said the Tin Woodman, trying to speak cheerfully, for we shall be able to keep Ginger out of the palace until she manages to break down the doors. And in the meantime, I am liable to starve to death, and so is the Wogglebug, announced Tip. As for me, said the Wogglebug, I think that I could live for some time on Jack Pumpkinhead. Not that I prefer pumpkins for food, but I believe they are somewhat nutritious, and Jack's head is large and plump. How heartless, exclaimed the Tin Woodman, greatly shocked. Are we cannibals, let me ask, or are we faithful friends? I see very clearly that we cannot stay shut up in this palace, said the Scarecrow with decision. So let us end this mournful talk and try to discover a means to escape. At this suggestion, they all gathered eagerly around the throne, wherein was seated the Scarecrow, and as Tip sat down upon a stool, there fell from his pocket a pepper box, which rolled upon the floor. What is this? Asked Nick Chopper, picking up the box. Be careful, cried the boy. That's my powder of life. Don't spill it, for it is nearly gone. And what is the powder of life? Inquired the Scarecrow as Tip replaced the box carefully in his pocket. It's some magical stuff that old Mombi got from a crooked sorcerer, explaining the boy. She brought Jack to life with it, and afterward I used it to bring the Sawhorse to life. I guess it will make anything live that is sprinkled with it, but there's only about 1 dose left. Then it is very precious, said the Tin Woodman. Indeed it is, agreed the Scarecrow. It may prove our best means of escape from our difficulties. I believe I will think for a few minutes. So I will thank you, friend Tip, to get out your knife and rip this heavy crown from my forehead. Tip soon cut the stitches that had fastened the crown to the Scarecrow's head, and the former monarch of the Emerald City removed it with a sigh of relief and hung it on a peg beside the throne. That is my last memento of royalty, said he, and I'm glad to get rid of it. The former king of this city, who was named Pastoria, lost the crown to the wonderful wizard, who passed it on to me. Now the girl Ginger claims it, and I sincerely hope it will not give her a headache." "A kindly thought, which I greatly admire," said the Tin Woodman, nodding approvingly. "And now I will indulge in quiet think," continued the Scarecrow, lying back in the throne. The others remained as silent and still as possible, so as not to disturb him, for all had great confidence in the extraordinary brains of the Scarecrow. And after what seemed a very long time indeed to the anxious watchers, the thinker sat up, looked upon his friends with his most whimsical expression, and said, "My brains work beautifully today. I'm quite proud of them. Now listen. If we attempt to escape through the doors of the palace, we shall surely be captured. And as we can't escape through the ground, there is only one other thing to be done. We must escape through the air." He paused to note the effect of these words, but all his hearers seemed puzzled and unconvinced. "The wonderful wizard escaped in a balloon," he continued. "We don't know how to make a balloon, of course, but any sort of thing that can fly through the air can carry us easily. So I suggest that my friend the Tin Woodman, who is a skillful mechanic, shall build some sort of machine with good strong wings to carry us, and our friend Tip can then bring the thing to life with his magical powder." "Bravo!" cried Nick Chopper. "What splendid brains!" murmured Jack. "Really quite clever," said the educated Wogglebug. "I believe it can be done," declared Tip. "That is, if the Tin Woodman is equal to making the thing." "I'll do my best," said Nick cheerfully, "and as a matter of fact, I do not often fail in what I attempt. But the thing will have to be built on the roof of the palace so it can rise comfortably into the air." "To be sure," said the Scarecrow. "Then let us search through the palace," continued the Tin Woodman, "and carry all the material we can find to the roof, where I will begin my work." "First, however," said the Pumpkinhead, "I beg you will release me from this horse and make me another leg to walk with, for in my present condition I am no use to myself or to anyone else." So the Tin Woodman knocked a mahogany center table to pieces with his axe and fitted one of the legs, which is beautifully carved, onto the body of Jack Pumpkinhead, who was very proud of the acquisition. "It seems strange," said he as he watched the Tin Woodman work, "that my left leg should be the most elegant and substantial part of me." "That proves you are unusual," returned the Scarecrow, "and I am convinced that the only people worthy of consideration in this world are the unusual ones. For the common folks are like the leaves of a tree, and live and die unnoticed." I notice the leaves on the trees, and I miss it when they go for the winter. Oh, back to the story. "Spoken like a philosopher," cried the Wogglebug as he assisted the Tin Woodman to set Jack upon his feet. "How do you feel now?" asked Tip, watching the Pumpkinhead stump around to try his new leg. "As good as new," answered Jack joyfully, "and quite ready to assist you all to escape." "Then let us get to work," said the Scarecrow in a businesslike tone. So glad to be doing anything that might lead to the end of their captivity, the friends separated to wander all over the palace in search of fitting material to use in the construction of their aerial machine. The astonishing flight of the Gump. That must be a Gump. Goodness. Well, we'll find out. We'll find out next time. Took over the palace just to be prisoners again. in a position of power, still prisoners. Well, kind of like owning a business anymore. You don't really own the business owns you. But be careful what you get involved in. Anyway, you have a happy night. Sweet dreams.